Most people think settlers just grew whatever was nearby, whatever was easy, whatever they stumbled into. That's not what the data shows. The plants that survived on early homesteads had specific traits, things like nitrogen fixation, long storage life, and high bioavailability that made them structurally better than everything else. We're going to go through 10 of them today, and once you understand the actual agronomy behind each one, the way you think about building a self-reliant garden is going to change completely. Number 1, corn, maize. The maize settlers grew looked almost nothing like what you'd find in a modern seed catalog. These were open-pollinated varieties selected over generations for storage, yield, and adaptability to local conditions, not for industrial processing. Now, corn alone is actually a nutritional trap if you don't know what you're doing with it. It's calorie-dense, but your body can't fully access those calories or the niacin locked inside without nixtamalization, which is the process of soaking and cooking the grain in an alkaline solution like wood ash or lime. Settlers who skipped that step and ate plain corn as a staple developed pellagra. The ones who learned the process from indigenous communities didn't. The yield math is what really explains corn's dominance, though. It doesn't need a plow to establish. The stalks feed livestock and burn as fuel, and an acre of maize outproduced an acre of wheat in most frontier soils. Number 2, beans. Every bean patch has quiet chemistry running underground that settlers never understood mechanically, but they absolutely noticed the result. Fields with beans in rotation stayed productive. Fields without beans wore out fast, and on a frontier homestead, worn-out soil meant a worn-out family. Soil nitrogen is the limiting factor in almost every pre-industrial farming system. Legume root nodules host rhizobium bacteria that pull nitrogen straight from the air and deposit it into the soil. That's free fertility, and bean rotation wasn't optional because of it. It was structural. Beans also covered the protein gap that corn left open. Corn runs low in lysine, beans run high in it, and together they form an amino acid profile that carries you through a hard winter. Settlers weren't pairing them for flavor. They were solving a nutritional problem without knowing the biochemistry behind it. Properly dried beans also store for years, not months. Number 3, squash. Squash looks like the weakest link in the Three Sisters system. It doesn't fix nitrogen, it doesn't anchor the caloric math the way corn does, and yet pull it out and the whole system gets harder to manage, because squash is doing a job the other 2 plants physically can't. Weed pressure is one of the biggest yield killers in pre-industrial farming, and squash handles it passively. Those broad leaves form a dense canopy at ground level that blocks sunlight from competing plants. It's living mulch, and the rough texture of the stems and leaves also deters pest insects from moving through the bed. Winter squash cures to a thick rind that locks out moisture and microbial entry, so it bridges the gap between fall harvest and spring planting as a vitamin A source. The seeds add fat and protein, 2 things a plant-based winter diet runs short on fast. Number 4, potatoes. Potatoes didn't arrive on the frontier as a calculated choice. Settlers stumbled into them and then kept growing them because they kept surviving conditions that killed everything else. Late frost, hail, drought that burned the grain crop to nothing, and the tubers underground stayed untouched. The caloric output per acre beats wheat, rye, and barley, and it does it in poor soil with less labor. That's not a small advantage when you're breaking new ground with limited tools. Potatoes also carry vitamin C, potassium, and B vitamins, so populations that paired them with some dairy or fat showed surprisingly complete nutritional outcomes for what looked like a monotonous diet. The propagation system matters too. You cut a portion of each harvest and replant it. No seed cost, no germination uncertainty, just a closed loop that feeds itself forward into next season. Number 5, cabbage. Scurvy didn't just kill sailors. Settlers facing a long northern winter with no fresh fruit faced the same nutritional cliff, and cabbage is a big part of why many of them cleared it. Most greens are gone by October, but a whole cabbage head in a cool root cellar holds its structure and vitamin C content for months longer than almost any other leafy vegetable. And when you ferment it into sauerkraut, the lactofermentation process preserves that vitamin C, and adds a probiotic bacterial profile that supports gut health through the cold months. Settlers weren't fermenting cabbage because it tasted better. They were buying themselves months of nutritional stability. Cabbage also extends the growing season on both ends. It tolerates frost in ways most crops don't. And the glucosinolates, the sulfur compounds behind that sharp flavor, carry documented antimicrobial properties that gave a winter gut some systemic support it otherwise wouldn't have had. Number 6, garlic. Before penicillin existed, settlers dealing with infected wounds and respiratory illness had a very short list of tools that actually did something. Garlic sat near the top of that list, and the reason isn't folklore. When you crush a clove, an enzyme reaction converts alliin into allicin, a sulfur compound with documented antimicrobial activity against a wide range of bacteria, fungi, and parasites. Egyptian laborers used it. Roman soldiers carried it. Medieval physicians prescribed it, all independently and across centuries. That kind of cross-cultural convergence doesn't happen by accident. From a cultivation standpoint, garlic's almost effortless. Plant cloves in fall, harvest in summer, save a portion as next year's stock. It cures in a dry space for months, and the flavor actually concentrates as it dries, so it's more potent after curing than fresh off the plant. Modern clinical research confirms allicin disrupts bacterial enzyme systems, including some antibiotic-resistant strains. The pharmacology caught up to the practice about 200 years late. Number 7, onion. Garlic gets all the attention, but onions were actually more useful to settlers on a day-to-day basis because you can grow them in bulk, store them longer, and work them into almost every preserved food you make. A properly cured onion in a cool, dry cellar holds its nutritional activity for 6 to 8 months. The quercetin in onions, a flavonoid with anti-inflammatory properties, stays stable through that whole storage window, so you're not just eating something that tastes like food. You're eating something that's still doing something. Onions also grow from sets, small bulbs saved from the previous harvest, which cuts seed cost entirely and speeds up the growing cycle. And the quercetin doesn't just support the person eating it. It actively slows microbial growth in cooked and pickled foods, so settlers cooking with onions were extending the safe life of their meals without knowing the mechanism behind it. Number 8, sage. Sage showed up in every serious kitchen garden, and most settlers couldn't explain why beyond habit and family tradition. But the chemistry behind it is real. The leaves carry rosmarinic acid and volatile oils, including thujone and cineole, that have documented antiseptic and anti-inflammatory activity. Settlers brewed sage tea as a gargle for sore throats and mouth infections, applied it as a topical wash on wounds, and used it to settle digestion after the heavy, fat-rich meals that got you through a winter. Modern research confirms that rosmarinic acid inhibits the same prostaglandin synthesis enzymes that some over-the-counter anti-inflammatories target, just at a lower intensity through dietary exposure rather than pharmaceutical dosing. Number 9, comfrey. Settlers called it knit bone, and that name tells you everything about how they used it. Medical help was days away on a working frontier homestead, so when someone tore a muscle or took a deep cut, comfrey was what you reached for. Modern clinical trials have proven what those settlers knew through observation. The leaves and roots carry allantoin, a compound that actively speeds up cell proliferation, meaning new tissue forms faster. Rosmarinic acid reduces the inflammatory response around the wound, and mucilage compounds protect the surface while that repair happens underneath. The taproot also mines minerals from deep subsoil that shallow crops can't reach, so cut leaves left to decompose on the soil surface feed neighboring plants passively. Number 10, yarrow. Ancient physicians used yarrow for wound care, Native Americans named it for stopping blood, and medieval soldiers carried it into battle. Settlers planted it at the garden's edge for the exact same reason, because it worked. Yarrow's hemostatic properties come from compounds that actively promote platelet aggregation and vasoconstriction right at the wound site. That's a measurable pharmacological mechanism, not folk belief. And it explains why packing a cut with crushed yarrow leaves slowed bleeding faster than cloth pressure alone. Once yarrow's established in a garden, it spreads through both seed and rhizome. tolerates poor soil and drought, and flowers long enough to support beneficial insects through most of the growing season. Every plant on this list solved more than one problem, stored or persisted through winter, and returned more than it cost to grow. That's not a coincidence. That's the filter a hard, resource-limited life applies automatically. And it's still the right filter if you're building a garden that works when supply chains don't.